Before we talk about Zone to Win briefly, I would like to ask you this. It seems to me you have had either one or two revisions to Crossing the Chasm. I don't really know how many because I read the original. What would you say are the signal attributes of the revision that help us bring it to today?
What was interesting about it is I revised it twice, and in neither case did I change anything about the framework at all. What I changed was all the examples, because what was happening was people would say, well, interesting book, never heard of these companies, right? So I had to change the examples in 1999, and I changed them again in 2014, and that was when I was able to bring in more SaaS and whatever. But the principles of the framework, it's been remarkably conservative. I mean, really, it's the same framework we've been using for 30 years, and it's just held up very, very well.
Well, it makes sense because the underlying drivers are all still there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the technology adoption lifecycle, which, by the way, was something originally was based on original research by a guy named Everett Rogers, and something called the diffusion of innovation. So if you have anybody listeners who want to kind of dig into the background of that, that's where it came from. And then a guy named Regis McKenna wrote a book called The Regis Touch. And I worked for Regis for 5 years. That's where I learned about the technology adoption lifecycle. And then my contribution was the chasm. That was what I added to the game.
Regis McKenna was associated with Apple Computer, wasn't he?
Oh, he was. Absolutely. He had been at Intel. He was the guy that invented high-tech marketing, really. Prior to Regis, marketing was Procter and Gamble. It was consumer marketing, and they would sort of apply it to business, but it was very, PR stood for like events like, car shows at parades. I mean, that kind of stuff. And he said, no. For high-tech purchase decisions, people need to be educated. And then you have to have a public relations thing focused on educating the powerful constituencies that help the pragmatist buyer make up their minds. So he had a whole very interesting communications model called the communications infrastructure model based on that. And in the last half of the night, I joined the firm in 1986. From 86 to 91, virtually every high-tech client on the planet came through those doors. So it was an incredible opportunity for me to be able to, sort of see what was going on. And
was Apple still using Regis McKenna during this job?
Oh yeah, for sure. But at Apple at that time, was interesting. They were going into a struggling period. They were still pretty successful. Well, very successful. The Macintosh was successful, but Jobs gets kicked out of his role early in the 90s, I think. And then Apple goes into a very, very tough period. But Steve Jobs and Regis McKenna were very close. And that was a very important relationship for both of them.
Let's talk about Zone to Win for just a minute or two. And True Confessions, I just read it here, or most of it here in the last few days. But the one thing, once again, to characterize it, I think one of the comments you've made is that it's sort of application of chasm theory to large corporations. And the biggest challenge that large corporations have is they are highly reluctant to cannibalize their existing business. And when I say highly reluctant, that's from the top all the way to the bottom, right? I mean, the momentum is so strong in one direction to get them to deviate in any meaningful way. And so ultimately, you're suggesting the creation of 4 zones of management and run those 4 zones quite autonomously with different rule sets, right? And but the one thing that I wanted to ask you, and feel free to elaborate however you choose on that, but the one thing that I thought was just this, that in order to pull off the Zone to Win thought process, it's both complex and extremely demanding. And I would assume that the CEO has got to be a combination of highly disciplined and visionary in order to do that. Otherwise, I'm not sure how you get there, but you have the practical experience.
I would say that that's true of the transformation zone. Let me kind of lay this thing out and kind of perspective around what you just said. So the zone model says, look, in an established enterprise, there are 2 zones you know very, very well. One we call the performance zone, and that's the zone that's got to make the number, right? That's the product revenue guys and the sales guys. It's the stuff you would report out if you're a public company in your earnings call. And it's how much revenue and how much growth and how much margins and market share. It's all the classic stuff that anybody in MBA would learn. That's the performance zone. That playbook is well established in any incumbent organization, and business schools have taught that playbook for 50 years. It's supported by a second zone called the productivity zone, which is all the cost centers that you need behind the scenes in order to make that work. It's all of finance, all of HR, all of IT, security, marketing, everything that you don't charge the customer for. That zone is organized around professional disciplines and standards. So they're not trying to make the number in the finance org, right? They're actually trying to audit the number. and there's a compliance, there's process, there's Six Sigma programs, there's efficiency, productivity. And so it's a different culture because the performance zone is very competitive. It's trying to win the battle this quarter, right? And the productivity zone is more in for the long haul, steady as she goes, measure twice, cut once. So those two zones, those playbooks, and they've been together forever, and everybody knows they're very different. I mean, people in the performance zone are not very good at the productivity zone and vice versa, right? So we got that. Then for disruptive innovation, it was like, well, do I even have to worry about it? Well, in high tech, we've always had to worry about it. But in automotive, who had to worry about disruptive innovation? Well, then all of a sudden Tesla comes along, right? And so all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, we do have to worry about it. So then you realize, well, the productivity zone and the performance zone are not set up to run experiments or be agile or fast failure. If you fail fast in the performance zone, you're going to get fired, right? And if you fail fast in the productivity zone, you might have to go to jail, right? So there's a third rule book, right? And that's the incubation zone. I would submit to you that as long as those are the three zones you're using, you don't have to be a visionary CEO to do that. There's enough established examples in industry say, okay, yeah, we have this incubation zone. It's off to the side. It's funded separately. We've kind of ring fenced it. We're managing it differently. Everybody's fine. The place where your comment really applies is the fourth zone, which is the only zone that is not permanent. The first three zones I would submit to you today, every company should have all three of those zones operating every year. But the fourth zone is called the transformation zone, and that's when you pull the trigger. That's when you go, we're not experimenting anymore, people. We're going to go all in. And 9 times out of 10, all the stories are about the visionaries who do it, like Jeff Bezos or Reed Hastings, all these people, amazing people who do that voluntarily and are the disruptors. God bless them. But 99% of the people I deal with are disruptees. They're not disruptors. Right. So the reason they go all in isn't because they want to disrupt other people. It's because they are getting disrupted themselves. So you're Mary Barra at General Motors, right? And you're trying to figure out what the heck are you going to do about Elon Musk, right? So that transformation zone is when you have to start moving substantial resources out of your performance zone and into this new area, which is, it's horrible because your most profitable business, you're underfunding in order to pour money into a money-losing operation. And at the beginning, you think, well, we can afford it. But at some point, it's like, well, we're going to lose money. And the answer is, yeah, we're going to lose money. And so if you don't have conviction behind that, if you get halfway in and quit, that's where as you know, the book starts with 56 iconic companies that you and I know very, very well. These were not the losers. These were the winners, and they don't exist today at all because they got halfway into these transformations. They couldn't stomach them. They pulled back. They got, weaker and weaker, and they went away. So that fourth transformation is not for the faint of heart. And if you just say, look, I'm just not set up to do that, then you have to find some way to get out of a transformation because you can't start one and not finish it.